Here we are with our producer, who is inspecting the set.
I think he's finding a lot of things aren't up to par.
Yep.
At least
Faulty electrics.
for his liking. Oh, what are these dragons doing here? This shouldn't be here at all. Oh no, not this dragon either.
Does it meet with your approval, oh Fluffy Master?
Alright, our producer's gonna take a nap.
I need a union. Hi, I'm ThriceRisen.
And I'm Jacob.
Today we're going to talk about the M19 core set for Magic the Gathering. This is super exciting. We haven't had a core set in a while. You know, I first started playing Magic the Gathering a month before M14, the core set of M14, was released, so I'm definitely excited to see the return of the core set to Standard.
You're so old.
I think before we dive into the core set, we need to discuss the concept of a core set. Because it's been a little while since we've had one, and some of our viewers who are younger to Magic may have never lived in the halcyon days of a core set. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about what a core set, that's going to be a hard word for us tonight, what a core set should achieve besides slimming the waistline.
Sure. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So, for those who haven't done so, I highly recommend you listen to Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast. It's phenomenal, and there was the job I had before this one afforded me the opportunity to listen to it pretty often. And basically, what Mark Rosewater was getting at is that the purpose of a core set is to provide the structural rules and playing field necessary for the game to survive, in order to take the pressure off of the flavor sets and the design sets, essentially, to have to support both the game's mechanics as well as their own story features. Essentially, one of the things he pointed out was that if you put too many responsibilities for how the game functions on the design sets rather than the core sets, then what ends up happening is that you have to have some very essentially bland or boring cards in these exciting new places, because certain cards have to exist for Magic as a game to work. There has to be a certain number of creatures, there has to be a certain number of removal and interaction spells. And so what a core set does is a core set enables you to have a framework for the game to function in a standard or even modern setting, which frees up the flavor sets, the exciting ones, more or less.
The cool ones.
To be free to do whatever they wish without having to worry about supporting the game by themselves.
So, this core set is not just bland cards, though. There's some pretty cool stuff in here. So with that mission in mind, it's going to need to provide balancing factors to the game, and this is usually achieved through reprints. Cards that have worked in the past, and so let's put them in a new core set and have them work again.
Yep.
So let's dive into some of the more noteworthy elements of core set M19. Anyone who's played Magic the Gathering for more than a few years will be able to look at M19 and notice that there are a lot of reprints in the set. Most notably, there are 3 cards that are being reprinted in this set that are driving people a little loopy. We have Crucible of Worlds, which is an artifact that costs 3 mana that simply says you may play land cards from your graveyard. Even in Standard, this is a really good card because there are a lot of cool utility lands in play that are going to be, especially there's all the cards that care about sacrificing deserts.
Yes.
So Crucible of Worlds is a great strategy for that.
If you remember people at your local game store being excited for what was it?
Ramanap?
Ramanap
Red?
Not Ramanap Hydra. There was another guy.
There was Ramanap Red.
The guy that lets you play lands from your graveyard. I can't remember his name. Excavator. We got there. The reason why they were excited for him is because he's a functional reprint of Crucible of Worlds. The ability to play
both of them
lands from your graveyards and have both of them and access to that is pretty powerful.
So I'm waiting now to see some really high value. Maybe there'll be a deck that's built around both Crucible of Worlds and Ramanap Excavator, because having a 4-of in a deck is not guaranteed to build a strategy around, unless that 4-of is just bonkers, like Collected Company a few years back. But as we saw with the modern deck of Cheerios, the addition of Shram to the Pure Steel Paladin, making it an 8-of in the deck, and I'm very glad I did all the right number of fingers the first time without trying, makes the deck a lot more consistent. So having an 8-of Crucible of Worlds might be something.
Yeah, having to rely on 4 copies of something in order for your deck to work, and if you're anything other than a control deck, can be very risky. Before we get into the other two, one thing I wanted to point out about reprints is reprints essentially accomplish 2 functions. They make it so that cards that were too expensive for the common player to access before, because they were only printed once like years ago, they enable players to have access to the card. The other thing that they accomplish is, take for instance Lightning Strike, something like that. Lightning Strike is pretty much a card that's designed to always be in Standard. Right? There's very few times when we can look back over the years where a Lightning Strike style effect was not playable. And so there are certain styles of cards that are just supposed to exist all the time. And reprints enable continual sets to make it so that all the players have access to these kind of evergreen staples.
One card that's not evergreen is Omniscience. You may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. So first we're playing lands from our graveyard, now we're casting spells for free. Now we pay the premium cost of 10 mana for this effect, but if you resolve it, it's huge, because all of the other resources in your hand, if you have any, are now just free. It's an expensive card. I was considering purchasing it for a Joda commander deck, because who doesn't want to do a turn 5 Omniscience? But now that it's getting reprinted, I might wait and see if I can snag one on the cheap. Speaking of cards that people are super excited to snag on the cheap, Scapeshift. With new art in this set. Sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for up to that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. I just noticed something. Crucible curves into Scapeshift real nice.
That it does.
So we're going to have Crucible of Worlds with Scapeshift in a deck that already has Hour of Promise, is the one that lets you get deserts.
2 lands. They can.
But if they're deserts. So I'm thinking there's going to be a Crucible Ramanap Scapeshift desert deck that uses green and probably red, I think, is the other good colors for the deserts.
I'm very excited to see what Scapeshift will do in a format that doesn't have Valakut, because that's pretty much the main reason it's played in Modern, is to abuse Valakut's entry triggers. But Scapeshift as itself has arguably more potential than that. That is just one application
It's
of
just the best potential
right.
in an Eternal format.
In that it wins the game when it resolves, more or less.
Yep.
So I'm excited to see what players will do with it once they have to think about other ways to utilize it.
So these are the big money reprints. If you pull one of these in a pack, you've made your money back. But it's really easy to focus on high value cards in the set, but as we said, reprints across the board are very important. M19 is loaded to the gills with reprints, both powerful and iconic. An incomplete list compiled by myself earlier includes Act of Treason, a Johnny's Pridemate, Anticipate, Banefire, Cancel, Child of Night, Colossal Dreadmaw, Daggerback Basilisk, Divination, Dragon Egg, Duress, Essence Scatter, Ghost Form, Giant Spider, Gravedigger, Gutter Snipe, Infectious Horror, Infernal Scarring, Lava Axe, Lightning Strike, Manolith, Mentor of the Meek, Millstone Murder, Naturalize, Oakenform, Omen Speaker, Palaka Worm, Plummet, Reassembling Skeleton, Reclamation Sage, Reliquary Tower, Rupture Spire, Shock, Switcheroo, Titanic Growth, Talarian Scholar, Tormenting Voice, Totally Lost, and Volcanic Dragon. And those are just the ones at the brief spew through of Mythic Spoiler that I recognize as being reprints. There might be older cards that are before my time that are being reprinted, or less commonly known cards.
One of the things you'll notice about some of these reprints is they assist with making a very playable draft format.
Yes.
These cards are they're good cards to have. I mean, most players will, not even the best versions of those kinds of effects, will have these in their collection.
Yeah. It's interesting to note that we have Banefire, Gutter Snipe, Lava Axe, Lightning Strike, and Shock coming into Standard just from this core set. I did a brief bit of looking through the last couple sets that are in Standard. There's very little direct burn in those sets. We have Wizard's Lightning from Dominaria. That's about it. That's notable. We have Vance's Blasting Cannons, Unfriendly Fire, Open Fire, Refuse to Cooperate, Trial of Zeal, Harsh Mentor I kind of include, and Insult to Injury are the other notable burn spells I noticed. But if you combine those with the list of reprints that are coming in, there's a sudden saturation of spells and effects that can stack direct damage to your opponent's life total.
And not only that, but we are actually getting a second creature with this core set that will deal damage when you cast instants and sorceries. Amonkhet had one.
Yeah, Gutter Snipe. I did mention that.
Right, a 2/1 for 1 that whenever you play, I believe it's an instant or sorcery, deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then now we have Gutter Snipe, which will fill out the 3-drop slot, so you can 2-drop into 3-drop or however you need to make that work.
I'm not saying there's a good burn deck here. I'm not saying it's capable of outracing some of the other strategies that are used by aggro decks at the moment, but there is a burn deck, and that is something we haven't had for a while.
So the most exciting thing for burn players right now is there's I can't remember the name of it. There's a new 1 and a black sorcery. It says your opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And if you mix that with things like Cut to Ribbons that can really push through damage or life loss even in the late game by providing removal early and then Ribbons to do the life drain after. Burn essentially sets you up in a good spot right now because one of the most popular decks, of course, is red-black aggro. And one of the things that can help against aggro is A, being faster than it, and B, giving fewer things for their Goblin Chain Whirler to blow up on your side. And so when you have a burn deck, you commit very little to the board, which can make it really easy to not have to deal with the rampant removal that we're seeing in the format.
Yeah, and there's just some. You made a great point about the black spell. I looked strictly at red cards when I did my little analysis of burn, but combining it with another color like black that has life loss, there actually could be a pretty decent deck here. There's also, as you said before, a strong element of answers. There's a lot of control elements and response elements to this set. In the color blue, we have Cancel, Disperse, Divination, and Essence Scatter. In black, we have Duress, we have Murder. There are green cards much needed like Naturalize, Plummet, and Reclamation Sage.
I mean, obviously, the 8th deck that made it into the recent Pro Tour that wasn't aggro burn was a control deck. So the potential is definitely there, even if it was kind of outshone in recent days.
I forgot to mention that Anticipate's also getting reprinted. So you have a Divination and Anticipate. Lots of great card selection even in the limited format. And
of course, all of those players are going to love playing Opt. Anytime you have a 1-drop, essentially cantrip that does any amount of scrying, it's going to see play.
Well, let's look at some of the other applications of this set. Because I'm predominantly a Commander player, I tend to look at every new set with this tinted lens of what impact does this set have for Commander, my chosen format. So it can make me a little blind to some of the other applications because I'm not 100% of what's going on with Standard and what's going on with Modern, because Commander is my jam. Even though Core Set M19 is kind of walking in the shadow of the heavy Legends Matter themes of the previous set, Dominaria, it certainly is no slouch when it comes to the Legendary Creatures department. We have 9 new Legendary Creatures to be found in this set, and 5 of them, in particular, give a whole new nostalgic meaning to the term EDH. EDH, if you did not know, is short for Elder Dragon Highlander, which is the original name for the Commander format because at first only the 5 Elder Dragons were legal to play as Commanders. These powerful, expensive creatures were the first generals, the first commanders. The first...
James, I'm not sure they're the only...
No, not those Elder Dragons. Get those out of here. You see, the Elder Dragons we're talking about hail all the way back from the Legends block, far back in Magic the Gathering's history.
Back when powerful creatures had to have a drawback built in to keep them from being too powerful.
As I was saying, these clunky, high-costed creature cards formed the foundations of the format that eventually became Commander. And now they have been given new life. The Elder Dragons have returned, each sporting a new card and fantastic art. One of them even has a nasty surprise in store for us. So let's talk about them in pseudo-alphabetical order.
Sure. So to kind of set the stage here, we just came out of a set where Legends were everywhere. And to some extent, I think that was a really good thing. It enabled a lot of players to try out the Brawl format. It enabled a lot of players who didn't have the Commander collections that their cohorts at their shop may have had to get into Commander. But ultimately what it resulted in is it kind of flooded the market a little bit. So I think that Wizards made a really good choice of kind of dialing back the legendary theme of this set and made it so that the legends they do have are very impactful.
Yes. They definitely used a great strategy in making these legends. Arcades the Strategist is a legendary creature, Elder Dragon, as all 5 of these Elder Dragons are. He's a 3/5 for 4 mana. That's already, ignoring all else, a pretty aggressive CMC.
We're off to a good start.
He has Flying and Vigilance. That's already pretty good for a creature of this CMC. Whenever a creature with Defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Each creature you control with Defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness, rather than its power, and can attack as though it did not have Defender. There is a thread on Reddit that says something to the effect of, I know we've been joking this whole time, but Wall of Kelp has gone from a 75-cent card to an $8 card since Arcades was spoiled. Defender decks are happening, and these walls are going to come at you.
Arcades brings a welcome refreshment to a deck that has long been kind of in a very particular niche of players' hearts. Typically before, if you wanted to play a Defender deck, you pretty much had to play Doran the Siege Tower. Not that it was impossible, but that he was really where Defender decks were able to shine because of his enabling them to deal combat damage equal to their toughness. We see here the same thing with Arcades, to where even though he's a 3/5, essentially he's going to enable your defenders to attack and utilize the fact that for 1 or 2 mana you're having a 3 or 4 toughness creature.
Also, you can play a Shield Sphere for 0 mana and have a 0/6, which is functionally a 6/6.
And not only that, but he even fuels the strategy. Whenever a creature with Defender enters, draw a card, that's not just thrown on there. That's to make sure that he as a commander can enable you, or not even just as a commander, but even just in a deck with Defenders in it, even if that's a 60-card format. If you want to build a deck around a creature, this guy's perfect for it.
And you include Wall of Omens and Wall of Blossoms, 2 cards with Defender that draw a card themselves when they enter.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I have a near encyclopedic knowledge of those types of cards.
And so we could actually see a surprisingly strong Wall deck come out of this, if only because Walls and Defenders have never really, with the exception of a certain few key cards like Assault Formation, they've never really had a chance to be in the spotlight. But when you take a dragon, an Elder Dragon this important, and kind of display that mechanic, it's going to get more attention than it had before.
That's a good point. And there are amazing cards with Defender. You have, is it Gatekeeper? The guy that lets you add mana equal to the number of Defenders you have in any color. And then you have Doorkeeper. It's not Gatekeeper, it's, I can't remember the name of it.
Axebane Guardian, I think?
Axebane Guardian, that's the one. And then you have Doorkeeper, that's where I was getting confused, which mills equal to the number of Defenders you have. So you have a lot of options there.
And Defenders are a naturally resilient battle plan. It's not like you're playing 3/1s and 4/1s. They're all able to survive and block effectively.
And you can get the, what's the wall, the Azorius wall that has Flying and Shroud?
Yeah, it's a 0/8. Wall of Mist? No, that's not quite right. I can't remember.
Wall
but
of Denial.
I have a foil version of Wall of Denial. It looks really nice.
And you have an 8/8 that has Shroud. Ugh.
It just gets better from there. It really does.
The moment you go through Defenders on Gatherer, which I did the moment this card was spoiled, and realize how cheap they are mana-wise for the power you get. You can drop 8 power Defenders as early as turn 2 or 3. It's pretty silly.
Long-time Doran players will know that there's a lot of instants that buff toughness but not power, and as a result, buff it way more than it's supposed to be buffed for 2 or 3 mana.
Let's look at the next one. Chromium the Mutable. This is a guy I'm on the fence on, because he's a 7/7 for 7, so he's at least equitable on mana. The art is phenomenal. He has Flash, this spell can't be countered, and he has Flying. And you discard a card until end of turn. Chromium the Mutable becomes a human with base power and toughness 1/1, loses all abilities and gains hexproof. It can't be blocked this turn. I'm on the fence about him because he's, like I said, he's really cool and he's really powerful. But that mana cost always gives me pause because, again, I'm a commander player and I don't want to pay 7 mana, then 9 mana, then 11 mana for a commander.
Right. So, I think that with what they wanted this card to do, I think that they couldn't have made it happen without that mana cost. If you had a 4-drop 4/4 with Flash, Flying, can't be countered, discard a card, that would have been a bit much. And so as a result, they had to buff the mana cost. And if they're going to buff the mana cost, they might as well buff the power and toughness to compensate. So, yes, I think a 7/7 for 7 is equitable, but I think the reason that he has to cost 7 is actually because of all of the abilities he had. The Flying, think about it, a 7/7 with Flying that can't be countered we're off to a good start there.
Yeah.
The fact that he has Flash and can block as a 7/7, whether they're on the ground or in the air, at that point he's a removal spell for 7. And then the fact that at any point you can discard a card to make him essentially, not get killed for more or less, not considering like board wipes and things like that, it makes him very resilient. Everything about this card says that it's really hard to deal with it. And so I think that's why they had to have the high mana cost on there, is because once he's out, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance because I've seen a lot of people say that they want to use him to build like a Tron commander.
Yeah.
Because if he's a 1/1, sure, but if he's loaded to the guild with equipment, doesn't matter, and he's unblockable, so he'll get through there. But at the same time, if you're dumping equipment into play, you don't have cards in your hand to activate the ability.
That's true.
So if you're gonna run equipment, you're gonna run cards or equipment that let you draw cards.
Yep.
Like the mask, is it Illusionist Mask or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Rogue's Gloves,
which is getting printed in this set. Sort of Fire and Ice, obviously. And then you could even run things like SRAM or Pierce Steel Paladin as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that there are cards supporting him that are printed in the set, because there's a card we'll talk about later that is not supported hardly at all in this set. We'll get to that. Palladium Moors, the next one, is the Ruiner. She's, I think, aside from the last one, probably one of the best of these.
She's definitely my personal favorite.
The art is phenomenal.
She hits all the major points for me. She's huge. She's in the right colors for what I'm usually trying to do, and that artwork is just absolutely phenomenal.
So why don't you take it? What would she do?
So Palladium Moors does what any good Naya creature is going to try to do. And if you're familiar with Naya as a strategy and Maya L style decks, you know that the goal of what Naya is trying to accomplish is to play the biggest creatures. Godsire, or even powerful effects, right, like Realm Razor, that have a big impact, but rightly so, cost a lot of mana. So with Palladium Moors, what you have is you have a 6/6, 4/6, with Flying, Vigilance, and Trample. So those are all very good, very aggressive words. And then she says that she has hexproof if she has not dealt damage yet. So essentially, one of the risks you run into playing large creatures, especially in Standard, is that there's any number of 2, 3, 4-drop removal spells that'll just take the fact that you played a huge creature and committed that much mana to it and just completely just turn the tables on you. So what Palladium Moors does is she says, all right, I'm going to commit this mana to this big creature, and as a result, you don't get to mess with it until it's done its job, essentially.
It's done something. It's either blocked,
right,
gone into the attack.
Yeah. So Palladium Moore says, I'm going to get to do what I want to do, and then after that I'll be fair about it.
As a commander, again, that tinted lens I see through, she's a decent Naya commander, and I think I really like her as a Naya commander because all the other Naya commanders I've seen have a game plan.
Yeah.
Like, they very clearly want you to do a certain thing.
Yep.
Build your deck a certain way.
Palladium
Moore doesn't
TCG,
care.
Omnath, not Omnath, Marath,
Mael.
all three of them have almost kind of strategies that are just super obvious on the surface.
Palladia doesn't care what your deck is. You could build a control deck with her as the finisher, and you could do some decent control-y things in Naya colors. Especially if you're committing like Aura Shards and other things to the table. Heck, a Blood Moon if your deck can support it.
Yep.
But Palladia could just be the finisher after you've ground the game down with all your control.
And in Naya, one of the things you get is creature buffs, extra combats, flicker effects to make her re-hexproof, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in her colors that support her.
Let's look at the next one. Vivictus Asmadi the Dire. He's a 6/6 for 6, so he's already hitting that equity. All of the Elder Dragons hit mana equity.
Almost exactly, too, because everyone we've seen so far has been exactly equity, with the exceptions that Arcades is 1 below on power and 1 up on
Yeah,
toughness.
so he's still 8 total of power toughness for the cost of 4, so he is still in equity. Vivictus Asmadi the Dire, Jund. He has flying, it's the only keyword he has. However, whenever Vivictus Asmadi the Dire attacks, for each player, choose target permanent that player controls. Those players sacrifice those permanents. Each player who sacrificed a permanent this way reveals the top card of their library, then puts it to the battlefield if it's a permanent card. So, interesting to note it says each player. This affects you as well.
Yep.
But I saw a throwaway comment that made me giggle. For Commander, people are going to use this with Lantern of Insight. In colors you would never expect to find Lantern Control.
Yep.
It has the green and the black, so it can just do without the blue of Lantern Control. You could build a Lantern Control deck with this giant angry dragon swinging into the red zone and stealing the best cards or putting the worst cards into your opponent's play. Oh, you have lands on top of your decks? I'm going to swing in and you get lands and I'm going to kill your important permanent.
So one of the things I like about Wizards as a company is that they have a really good memory. They don't just kind of throw new things together haphazardly. If you've played Jund much, if you've played Prosh, you know that sacrificing is something Jund does. You've got cards like Shattergang Brothers. You've got cards, that want your cards to end up in the graveyard. Sequar the Death Keeper. You've got cards, even Dragon Appeasement. You have a sacrifice theme kind of in those colors. That's kind of something they can agree on to some extent. And then what Vivictus Asmadi does, if you look at it in Commander terms, it essentially, when you attack, Chaos Warp 4 things. Now, a couple Magic officials have gone on record saying that Chaos Warp should not have happened, that it was too big of a color break, and that it's ultimately too powerful and something those colors weren't meant to do. That does not stop me at all from putting it in every single red deck I build.
As you should.
As you should. But so, Vivictus Asmadi...
Perhaps proving the point.
Exactly. He hits this perfect balance of, I'm going to get value off what I'm doing because they have to sacrifice those things. You get rid of their, arguably, their biggest threat. And it does say permanent. It's not just, non-lands.
I mainly see him clearing blockers out of the
Right.
way.
Exactly. But
So
then
he
he
can crash
says,
in.
I'm going to benefit from the fact that I'm making this happen.
Mm-hmm. And you can always choose your least valuable permanent. So in a deck like Jund, you also have lots of strategies that make tokens throwaway permanents that you don't have to feel bad about losing. And you could even punish your opponents worse. So if you're making tons of tokens, you could have Blood Artists, Zulaport Cutthroats, Grave Pact, Dictates of Erebos to make them sacrifice more and more things.
He doesn't have haste, but there are ways to give it to him.
In red, absolutely.
This is a very powerful card. There's a reason he doesn't have, even half the keywords the other dragons
He just
have.
has flying.
Because
he doesn't need it, because unless they're on some kind of Air Force deck, he can effectively assure that he's unblockable, because he's going to get rid of the thing he's most concerned about.
Now, I will say, he doesn't outright kill Chromium or the Palladium ores.
Yeah.
At least unless she has dealt damage.
That is true. That is true. Now, let's get to the last and most infamous Elder Dragon, Nicol Bolas the Ravager, who I have already built a deck and is waiting for him to arrive.
I've built a deck as well, but not for him.
He is on pre-order. So, it shows you how interested I am in this card. Nicol Bolas the Ravager, he's a 4/4 for 4, so equity. And for a 4 mana Elder Dragon, this card is insane. He has flying, as dragons should. When Nicol Bolas the Ravager enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. That's immediate value, and if you're thinking about a multiplayer commander game, glasses, on turn 4 at the latest, or earliest, well, no, not earliest, in Grixis you can definitely accelerate that. On turn 4 at the latest, if you're curving out well, you're going to strip 3 cards for 1. And you're going to have a 4/4 in play. And he'll be able to start doing commander damage a lot earlier than most people deploy their commanders, and he'll be evasive. And 4 damage is a 6-turn clock in commander. That adds up quick. But that's not all he does. You can pay Bolas amount of mana, and when I say that I mean the cost of all his Planeswalker cards, 4 and Grixis, exile Nicol Bolas the Ravager. Where have we heard this type of wording before? Then return to the battlefield transformed under his owner's control. This seems really familiar. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So he transforms into a Planeswalker. Nicol Bolas the Arisen. And I like what they've started doing with Bolas Planeswalker cards to showcase his power. They're starting to just give them 4 loyalty abilities.
Yep.
To showcase how powerful he is. And this Nicol Bolas is one of the strongest ones we've seen in a while.
Yeah, he absolutely delivers.
He drops down on 7 loyalty, so you're paying 7 mana, realistically, for his Planeswalker activation. You're switching him to a 7 loyalty Planeswalker. Yes, technically you're paying 11 mana total. But, to be able to guarantee a Nicol Bolas Planeswalker on turn 7...
And he does get value when he enters.
When he transforms, you have the first loyalty, +2, draw 2 cards. He has an aggressive up that gets you more resources.
There are very few instances where you're ever not going to want that.
And because you're doing this on turn 7, you may have thinned your hand by now, or you should have if you're curving out well. So he's helping you immediately to reload.
Right.
And his 7 loyalty means that there are very few threats that are going to deal with him when he goes up to 9 loyalty.
Yeah.
They're going to have to really gang up on him. And the great thing about this card is he will still cost 7 to switch every time. That's not subject to a commander tax.
Yep.
It'll cost 6 mana to bring out the second time. So if you play him, they discard a card, you flip him, and they kill him, well, you'll play him again and strip another card out of their hand. So killing him is still not solving the issue.
Right.
His -3, he deals 10 damage to target creature or planeswalker.
That's a fancy way of saying destroy target creature or planeswalker.
Yeah, it's going to
while
kill
making
most
it fair.
things are going to die. It'll even kill another Nicol Bolas the Arisen. -4.
There can only be one.
Yeah. Put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Here's the cool thing. He comes in at 7 loyalty, you can -3 kill something, then -4 get rid of him, and reanimate that thing he just killed the previous turn.
Or, for the savvy players, you can reanimate the thing that they discarded when you cast him as a creature.
Super value. What's his ultimate do? Bolas should have a good ultimate, right? -12. Exile all but the bottom card of target player's library.
So this is where Bolas in some people's opinion, falls short as a commander. He only does that to one person, not each of your opponents. However,
It's functionally killing them.
that's basically killing them.
Unless that last card is Laboratory Maniac.
Right, which would be just so unfortunate.
In response, I cast Opt.
So essentially what this does is it just takes someone's deck and takes it out of the game. Flavorfully, what's happening here is he's literally just wiping someone's mind, which is a very Bolas thing to do. In a lot of the flavor, especially if you read a lot of the blue cards, even older blue cards especially, the library is kind of this manifestation of knowledge. Where
It's your mind.
When you gain knowledge, you're drawing cards, or when you're going crazy, you're discarding cards, but perhaps drawing new cards. So essentially what is happening here is he's just wiping the slate clean. The thing about exiling, though, is that means that effects that essentially would save you from mill, like Ulamog's reshuffle clause, are not going to help against Nicol Bolas.
Nope. Lathless the Dragon Queen. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. And you can pay 1 and a red. Dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. She has flying, as all dragons should. And she's a 6/6 for 6 in mono red legendary creature dragon with gorgeous art.
The word dragon appears on this card 5 times. If that is not enough dragon for you, that's about as dragon as it gets.
Yeah.
In the words of Kanye West, she has dragon energy.
So, this pairs really well with all other dragon tribal, like Utvara Hellkite, Scourge of Volkos. You can build a mono-red dragon matters deck, which can be supplemented by the new Sarkhan, which we'll talk about in a bit.
So what's interesting is her trigger kind of reminds you right off the bat of Utvara Hellkite, which is whenever a dragon attacks, you get a dragon token. Of course, Utvara is more expensive than she is and is not legendary, and so as a result, what this does is it really enables dragon decks. One of the biggest drawbacks to playing a dragon deck is that each iteration of your tribe is expensive. The good dragons tend to start out at 4 and only go up from there. If you compare that to like Knight Tribal, Kithkin Tribal, Elf Tribal, you're running into this problem where you have to commit resources to your threats. Now the threats are powerful and worth it, but they ask a lot of you. What Ladlith does is she says, okay, I respect that you're playing powerful dragons. Here's some more dragons to make that worth your while.
Speaking of dragons, we have Dragon's Horde. I like this card so much that I pre-ordered one.
This is a very flavorful card.
It's a 3-mana artifact. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, put a gold counter on Dragon's Horde. You can tap it, remove a gold counter from Dragon's Horde, draw a card. Or you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Here's my argument for this card. This is a hill I'm not going to die on it, but I'll fight on it for a few minutes. This card is good in any EDH deck that has at least 1 dragon in it. If you're going to use any 3 mana rock, even if your commander is the only dragon in the deck, this card should be a mana rock in your deck.
It's the same thing that goes for Path of Ancestry. Path of Ancestry goes in literally every commander deck, whether you're playing tribal or not, because A, it taps for every color in your commander's color identity, which just makes it fine, and B says as long as you play your commander, it's going to get value off of it. Dragon's Horde does a similar kind of function.
Yeah, so I think it's perfect. Here's another spicy card talking about commander specifically before we get into the next sections of our video here. This is a card that I'm going to have a lot of fun with. It's another card I pre-ordered.
I have no intention of playing this card even one time.
I have every intention of playing this card, and it's going to be great. Chaos Wand. A 3-mana artifact, which is it's good. Pay 4 and tap. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order. This card is insanely powerful, and breaking it down, before it gets really stupid, and I'll explain the really stupid in a minute, Paradox Engine. Oh look, I explained it.
Oh no.
Paradox Engine, for
Paradox
those who can't understand Coffinese.
Cabal Coffinies.
Cabal Coffinese. I'm just picturing like a coffee brand. Cabal Coffee.
Right, Cabal Coffee. Just on every corner store in the undermarket.
Yep. Chaos Wand lets you rifle through your opponent's deck for the low cost of 7 mana to get its first activation off, and steal a spell from their deck. But here's the thing. The word may appears in this card. So if it's a spell that's detrimental to you or that you have no use for, you can just not cast it. So okay, that's kind of neat. But here's the fine print. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order. So if you choose not to cast it, it goes back into their deck.
Mm-hmm.
But if you cast it, it goes to their graveyard normally. So you can always choose not to cast a detrimental spell from your opponent's deck. Now, how does this get really stupid with Paradox Engine? Well, if you have Paradox Engine and enough mana rocks to fuel the Chaos Wand, you can storm off using your opponent's decks.
That's messed up. That's really messed up.
And the only time it stops is if for some reason you elect not to cast something. Like if they have, I don't know, a Fracturing Gust. You don't want to cast that. You're not going to cast that. You just put it back in their deck.
Get it
and
out.
Every time it shows up, you ignore it. But, so you're going to want to have a few cards or other things to keep the engine going should it stall out, because then the reason why this goes infinite with Paradox Engine and 4 mana worth of mana rocks is because Paradox Engine says whenever you cast a spell, untap all your online permanents. So you're casting the card out of their deck, so it untaps everything. Yeah, this is stupid. I'm going to put this in my Joyra commander deck, and I'm going to storm off using someone else's deck.
Just hope they don't run out of instants and sorceries.
Well, then I just pick another
person.
Pick another person.
Oh no, it's Primal Surge. What have I done? I'll take that.
Oh, I would cast Primal Surge.
Alright, but that's the last one.
Yep. I'd be okay
A very
with
interesting card. Not even slightly my style of card, but very cool.
Oh, it's a combo player's dream. It's like Paradox Engine wasn't good enough. Here, let's give you stuff to use with it.
That's true.
This was printed. It says partners with Paradox Engine.
If this said target opponent mills until they hit a ramp spell and you cast that ramp spell, I would play it. I mean, that's just how it is.
I mean, it's kind of what it can say.
It can say
You
that.
just target the Palladium Wars player.
Exactly. You're playing green.
If we want true artifice, we need to seek a master. Tezzeret Artifice Master, who I did not neglect to pre-order immediately.
The problem with Sai is that he still has flesh. What a weakling.
He has not gained the ability to pass between planes and bring other things with him. Because Tezzeret Artifice Master is a 5 loyalty for 5 mana. Planeswalker, Tezzeret. His +1 creates a Thopter artifact creature token with flying. He's already better. He makes his own Thopter.
That's
he doesn't wait for other people to help him.
Why wait when you can just make Thopters?
You can 0 him to draw a card. If you control 3 or more artifacts, draw 2 cards instead.
Yep. Effectively Metalcraft.
Really good. And his -9, his -9, you get an emblem that says, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library.
So he has himself become the planar bridge, or the planar portal, as it may be.
And here's the thing. If you're playing him in a Planeswalker deck, which you should, because if you doubling season him out and ultimate him immediately, you don't care what happens in the rest of the game at that point, because you're going to go, hey look, permanent. Permanent. This is an emblem. What are you going to do? Permanent.
It's actually surprisingly reminiscent of the old Epic spells. Epic was an old spell, an extremely expensive spell that said when you cast it, you can't cast any other spells for the rest of the game, but at the beginning of each of your turns, you get to do something for free.
And being completely honest about Tezzy here, his other 2 abilities aren't exciting enough to where I wouldn't sacrifice him to his ultimate with no hesitation.
Oh yeah, no, he understands that you need tools in order to win the war.
Mm-hmm. Life needs things to live. Now let's go through some of the cards in the rest of the set. This time we're going to do this a little bit differently than in our previous videos. I'm going to name a card, and we'll take just a few seconds to describe if the card is a hit or miss, which formats it'll see play in, and some other comments about it. All right, let's do it. Hit or miss. First off, a Johnny's Welcome. 1 white enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Hit or miss? What do you think?
I think it pairs really nicely with Authority of the Consuls. You can essentially assemble Soul Sisters, but you got to put a little more work into it.
Yeah.
So
I agree. It's a strictly worse Soul's Attendant or Soul Warden because it's not attached to a body.
right. So, but it does make it a little harder to remove against certain strategies.
True. Dwarven Priest.
I mean, it's not good, but it's cool.
Yeah, I put it in here just for you because it's a dwarf cleric. I figured you'd like it.
I pre-ordered it. I don't know about you guys, but
Goblin Motivator, I think, is a hit because of all the goblins that are already out there.
Yes.
And he's great for your dragon decks. Oh, this Vivictus Asmati doesn't have haste. Well, he does now.
I can fix that. It's really interesting because this really fills a gap. There were a ton of creatures that are 1 or 2 cost and tap to give something haste, but none of them were goblins, which is, in goblins you would think that's super common in them. The reason they haven't done it until now is because a lot of the 3-drop goblin lords gave haste. But now we have it on a 1-drop that can essentially support other strategies. And don't forget, he's also a warrior, and that is important in some corners.
Poison Tip Archer is a card I'm on the fence about.
Gosh dang it, how could you possibly be on the fence about this card? It's completely busted and I hate it.
2/3 for reach, or 2/3 for 4 with reach and death touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life.
So a 2/3 for 4 in Golgari that says, if you're already doing what you want to do, win harder because of it.
And he's a great defender, unlike all the other cards that share this type of effect.
I think they just wanted to print something that's good with Slimefoot, because they looked at Slimefoot and they said, you know what makes Slimefoot better? What if he just did more damage?
Yeah, that's true.
A Golgari win con if ever there was.
Speaking of a great win con, I watched the recent Command Zone Game Nights podcast, video where they had Day 9 and Ashley Birch, and Psychic Corrosion was a real MVP in that game, especially when they played more than 1. Sorry, spoilers. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard.
So the thing about mill is that it's normally just that you mill and it's working, but that's all it's doing. You're already going to be drawing cards. You don't have to do anything else to make this work. It's what made Hedron Crap so good. It was a 1-drop with landfall. It's not like you're not going to be playing lands, so it's just kind of automatic. Psychic Corrosion, same thing. It just gets out there and it just does its job.
Stitcher's Supplier.
Now this, Deb from Strictly Better MTG was talking about this one here. This is a heck of a card. Any kind of mill
the art
or dredge
resonates with me for some reason, and I don't like zombie cards.
Yeah. I mean, the Stitcher's Supplier, the lady herself doesn't look much like a traditional like arms falling off, body falling apart zombie. So she's kind of very composed, if you will.
It took me a moment to realize that she was in fact a zombie, and that moment was when I looked at the creature type, because the art, unless you look real carefully, you can see like the stitching and stuff. She just looks like an ordinary lady.
Right, exactly. So the effect, when she enters or dies, put the top 3 into your graveyard. Super good for decks that want to do that.
Thud.
Yes. At long last, Thud, which is just A+ on the name, by the way. Just a single syllable, just absolutely perfect.
Just like Fling, its other similar cousin.
So it is a sorcery speed fling that costs 1 less mana. A single sorcery, sack a creature. It deals damage to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. Let's not forget that we're in a format now with 12 tells for 2. That we're in a format with 5 4s for 3 and 10 10s for 5. Like, this is a card. And we could see an entire archetype with Thud as a finisher.
Mm-hmm. And Fling is in standard right now, right?
Yeah, Fling I believe is also in standard.
Fling Thud.
Fling and Thud. buddies at large.
Volley Veteran.
Now I'm actually very excited about this. I pre-ordered 4 of all the goblins in this set. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's just because I play. Here's the thing about goblins though. Goblins, all right. Can you play goblins in Legacy? Well, sure you can. Can you play goblins in Modern? Oh yeah. Can you play goblins in Standard? You sure can. Can you play goblins in Commander? Absolutely. They are an extremely flexible creature type. And so anytime they print anything that says goblin on it, I'm going to be like, well, that's going to go in something. So what this guy does is he's a 4/2 for 4. But when he enters, he deals damage to target creature an opponent controls equal to the number of goblins you control. Now, anyone who's played goblins for any number of time knows that Gem Palm Incinerator is the best goblin in the game, period. There is no goblin in the game that is better than Gem Palm Incinerator. And that's because he cantrips, but B, he kills something. You don't want to have to spend a whole lot of, lightning bolts and all that stuff like you can, but it's better if you can just play more goblins, right? And what this guy says is, sure, I see that you're playing all those goblins. I'm going to go ahead and take care of the fact that you're not spending mana on removal when you probably should be, so that you can play more goblins instead.
He also has amazing flavor text.
Oh yeah, and the art is just so great.
Fill the sky with stuff.
Fill the sky with stuff. I think that at the end of the day, when he lays down, it'd be an awful lot like a thud.
Now this is an interesting and controversial hit or miss card. Nexus of Fate.
I don't actually know what it does.
You pay 5 mana and 2 blue. You take an extra turn after this one.
Ooh, 7 mana. Oh, sorry, 5 and 2 blue. I got
5 and 2 blue.
Got there.
It's an instant. Take an extra turn after this one. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle into its owner's library instead.
Okay, interesting. An instant speed extra turn.
That doesn't exile itself. Now, one more bit of information you need to know about this card. It is the Buy a Box exclusive promo.
Ah, so they're still doing those.
Yep, this is the one.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a little more sought after than Fire Speaker and Sun Song and Fire Speaker. Again, the people who liked Fire Song and Sun Speaker liked them a lot and got them. But Nexus of Fate is probably just going to be something that a large group of players want to get.
Because it's infinite extra turns if you have the means to go find it again.
Right.
But it's a lot of mana.
It is, but at the point at which you can cast it, you might be able to cast it again, and that might be all you need. I think the thing that really makes it shine is that it's instant speed, though. I don't think we haven't really seen...
Do it in response to someone doing something unsavory at the end of your turn?
Exactly. So, yeah, honestly, this is probably going to see play in Commander. And let's not forget, there are things even in Standard that can cheapen instants and sorceries. We've got Brawl, we've got Primal Amulet, we've got... we've even got there's a 2-drop wizard that can tap for mana that you can only cast on an instant or sorcery. So,
Apex of Power.
The people who want to play this card really want to play this card. The people that don't want to play this card are never going to play this card. This appeals very strongly to a very select group of players. It has a very particular set of skills.
Sarkhan Fireblood. His +1 says look for dragons. His other +1 says play dragons.
Yeah.
And his -7 says dragons.
I'm seeing a theme between Liliana and this guy that they're kind of going for something here.
More dragons.
I mean, at the point that they have a goblin-related planeswalker,
dragons
and no, Duretti does not count. He's artifact synergies, not goblin synergies. Then it's gonna be a good time. So again, +1, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. On a 3-drop planeswalker, that's really good. That means you play him on turn 3, you get rid of that mountain you don't need anymore because you're at 3 mana, and you
hold
go
on to a dragon.
And you hold on to a dragon that you might want to cast in 3 turns.
No, you cast it the next turn.
Exactly, because
dragon.
Then you add 2
dragon mana.
And notice, in any combination of colors. So yes, he himself is red, but if you're looking to play one of the 3-color dragons, if you're looking to make a 5-color dragon deck in Standard because you're a mad person,
he helps you cast
can help you do
Bolas
that.
on the next turn.
Yes, absolutely.
Demon of Catastrophes.
Pre-ordered 1. It's a hit.
It's interesting that you said 1.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just hold this number right here for a minute.
Whee.
Desecrated Tomb. I think it's pretty neat. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up new strategies we haven't seen before.
Detection Tower. It's another arcane lighthouse in Standard.
And it's good.
Dismissive Pyromancer. Nah.
I like it.
I mean, it's alright. Gin of Wishes.
I don't like it.
No. Elvish Clangcaller.
It's
a
really
lord.
expensive.
It's very expensive.
Okay, so here's the thing. Everyone that wants Elvish Clangcaller wants 4 of it.
Yeah.
And
it wants it back.
This card is not going down, just period, because it's a 2-drop Elf Lord. It's only ever going to go up. In terms of investments, you're not going to lose value on this card, just period.
Fraying Omnipotence, talking about losing value.
Jeez Louise, I'm going to cast it. I don't know about you guys. Everyone's like, oh, no, you can't run Death Cloud. Death Cloud's going to like 10 mana into Death Cloud.
Gigantosaurus.
I want to tell you how many of these are really. I'd rather, then my wife would know how many I've ordered.
Goblin Trashmaster.
It's a Goblin, it's a Lord, it's not a 3-drop, which is really weird, but it does let you destroy artifacts, which is kind of nifty if your opponent's doing stuff.
Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma.
Thought to be one that certainly punched. We're not sure.
Graveyard Marshal.
Based on your hopefully not. Graveyard Marshal. It's popular. It's a 2-2 zombie. It's good. We're gonna go off.
Infernal Reckoning, another controversial one.
Answers modern decks. So thank goodness.
Yep. Isareth the Awakener.
I don't like it, but it's good.
It seems like it's so close to being good, but not quite. I have a similar view of Isolate.
Oh, I think Isolate's great.
It's good. It's highly situational.
Isolate is one of those cards where you look at it and you kind of realize you're surprised this hasn't existed yet because it just makes so much sense.
Lena Selfless Champion.
Rear to 4, legendary, don't care. Get forward it, playing forward.
Leon Warrior.
It's very similar to the Knight that is thing with Battlecry.
Oh, yeah.
Hero Legal. Main difference being, of course, doesn't have Battlecry, but it does have a 4 power and the tokens makes it lifelink, so it is a variation of that card.
Liliana's Contract.
I actually really like it, which is weird.
Let's bring this back in. When Liliana's Contract enters the battlefield, you draw 4 cards and you lose 4 life. So you have 4 cards, 4 life for 5 mana. Okay. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. Remember how we said you ordered one of that demon?
I did order one of that demon.
There's only one demon in this whole set.
Really?
So
it's
in
just
limited,
the one?
in limited, this card doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to get all kinds of luck.
So I decided to do some research.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to the previous set, Dominaria. There's one demon in that set.
Oh my
Demon
gosh.
Lord Belzimon.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let's go back even further. Let's look at the Amonkhet block. There are a total of 6 demons across both sets of the Amonkhet block. Not 6 good demons, 6 total demons. This card's gonna be really hard to fire off in Standard.
Yes, it is.
It's gonna be next to impossible, considering the cost of these cards. Most of these demons are expensive, and most of them aren't good.
This is what they call a sleeper card. This card is the kind of card where a year down the road, we're going to be like, oh wait, that exists.
So here's the thing though. The next set is a Ravnican set. Are we gonna have like a crap ton of demons in Ravnica? If so, what's going on there?
It'd be like just somebody opened the gates of hell and just the Demir were like, I've got a great idea.
But yeah, I was like, there's only 8 demons in Standard.
They just wanted to do something nifty. Also, this, can I just say, complete flavor win for Liliana's 4 demons.
Oh, it's an absolute flavor win. It's a phenomenal card. In a Demon Commander deck, it says you win the game pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
But I was like, but
it's a
I'm
very
pretty sure
odd
I didn't
card.
see any other limited demons, and Talk about the card that is likely to be the Professor's favorite card in the set, Mistcaller.
Yeah. Yeah, that hurts me. That hurts me real bad.
It's a Containment Priest on a 1/1 Merfolk.
Yep, so I go to cast my, what's that card? Double Harvest or whatever? Second Harvest, that's it. It's like, alright, I'm going to make a bunch of tokens, and they're just like, actually...
Well, it's non-token creature.
Oh, is it non-token?
It's a Containment Priest.
Oh, it's a Containment Priest in blue. It makes sense, actually. Blue. It makes sense for blue to have that style of effect.
A Johnny, Adversary of Tyrants, hit or miss.
This card really broke my heart. I saw this card immediately, and I mean immediately, on Facebook right after I'd seen the 4-drop Nicol Bolas. I saw the 4-drop Nicol Bolas and I was like, holy crap, that's a card. And then I immediately scroll down and I see Mythic Ajani, which means he's probably not the one from the Planeswalker deck that's going to have the bad Planeswalker in it. I'm like, alright, here we go. And I read it and I was like, darn. Well, that's disappointing. It's not that he's terrible. He's not the 4-drop Gideon, though, that's for sure.
Runic Armasaur. I've never read the English version of this card until right now because it was spoiled in another language. This card's phenomenal.
I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna play it every time.
It's a 2/5 for 3. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that is not a mana ability, you may draw a card.
It's gonna happen.
Going in every Dino deck.
Reminds me of Heartswood Storyteller. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, each of that player's opponents draws a card. Kind of a similar-ish effect.
I'm gonna have some harsh words for Sarkhan's Unsealing.
I love that card. It's so stupid good.
I think it's a miss. It's a do-nothing card. It does nothing but cost you 4 mana, and all of its value hangs on you casting an expensive spell on the next turn. Or immediately. So, it's one of those cards that if you let it sit there, of course it's going to run away with the game. But if your deck has answers, and we talked earlier, there's a lot of answers in this format.
That's true.
For enchantments. If you let it sit there and you let it kill you.
Right. But
you shouldn't.
if it is a do nothing card, then it's one of those things where it's going to dodge removal because it doesn't feel as pressing as well.
But it is absolutely a card that it does nothing right away, and that's why I think it's kind of my unpopular opinion, because you're going to look at this card and go, oh, I need to kill that before it kills me.
Right, because it's just going to keep
And they will
dealing
have
forward.
every opportunity to do so, because you have to cast the card to make it work.
So, essentially what this card says to me is they wanted a way to let you play Where Ancients Tread or Warstorm Surge in Standard, and they knew because of the mana cost, because those are indexed where the creatures are already themselves 5 in mana plus, it's just not going to happen. So this is a weaker Warstorm Surge. Granted, the effect is on cast though, so that actually does have its own benefit.
Sigiled Sword of Valeron. You like knights? What do you think about this?
I'm not gonna lie, I've looked at the art multiple times. I'm almost certain it is the sword that what's his face, Rafika the Many wields. If you look at both of his arts, you'll notice that his sword near the hilt, near the crossguard, has a face on it. And so even if it's not his sword specifically, it's definitely from Bant. Because Bant Knights, as you'll notice, the chains and the kind of the sigils hanging off the sword, Bant Knights are famous for their sigils. As far as the card itself, we have a number of 3 mana, 3 equip cards, and I think this one's pretty good. Whenever it attacks, you make a 2/2. So it's kind of like a smaller, weaker Moonsilver Spear. It's less mana, it's less power.
I mean, the knight sticks around, though.
Yeah, that is true. The knight sticks around. The creature you're equipped to just suddenly becomes a knight, which is just hilarious if you think about certain cards holding this thing. Like, you put it on an ooze, and the ooze is just like, I know my purpose! And it just is filled with conviction, and then just knights start supporting it out of nowhere. They're like, you see that ooze over there? That's worth a following right there. So, it's just it's a real win for me.
Well, with that, we are all drawn out of our little review of the set. We're not reviewing every card because there's a lot of reprints, there's a lot of fodder in the core set.
And now for Jake's Corner. There is one card we did not mention today that players everywhere are going to want tons of copies of. There is now Warren Instigator, a 1 and a red goblin, 1/1, that when he comes in makes a 1/1. So, what was it they said in that one movie? Goblins are back on the menu, boys.
Yeah, it's me's back on.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's pretty much what goblins are. I don't know if you've seen
Protean Hulk is meat. And eggs.
I mean, eggs.
Meat.
It's too much.
But there are a lot of good cards in this set. I know we can get a chance to look at all of them, so let us know if there are cards that you think we missed. If you agree or disagree with our evaluations, feel free to flood the comments with how much I'm wrong about, what was it, Sarkhan's, whatever that card is that I said was not good.
If we didn't mention Goblin Chamberwhirler enough, it's because we assume you know it's going to wreck everything that has 1 toughness.
So, if we had thought about the video even more, we would have just neglected to mention any of the creatures with 1 toughness because they just don't exist.
It's just
aside from
Rexage.
Right Rexage is all right because he's done his work.
It's too late by that point.
But I don't think he has much work to do against a chain.
They could print a 5/1 for 4 that at your upkeep wins you the game and people couldn't play it.
Chain Whirler.
Chain Whirler.
I am about to win the.
The thing about Chain Whirler though is you're going to be hard pressed to find a Goblin deck that just doesn't run him because why wouldn't you? And so optimal Goblin decks are going to run into the issue of A, you need to shell out for them, and B, your own deck loses to them. So it's going to make a lot of the Goblin tribal, the people who love Goblins, in a really awkward spot because they're going to be playing against a deck who Goblin Chain Whirler is that deck's only Goblin, and you're like, you're not playing Goblins, right? And they're just like, I don't care that he's a Goblin, he's just a Chain Whirler to me. And it's going to make you really sad.
Yep. And, let's see. So with that, we are... Well, that's our producer telling us that we're out of time. So we're going to have to cut this short. I'm ThriceRisen.
I'm Jacob.
Thanks for watching.